Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the celebration. It is a pleasure and an honor to have you joining us today. This week, I am joined by the amazing, the brilliant. She goes by the name of Terna. How's it going, Terna?
Good, Tom. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Likewise.
So, Terna is a Nigerian, Liberian, American artist, facilitator, and healer currently based in the Boston area. She holds an MA in counseling, psychology, and global mental health. She also holds a graduate degree in international conflict analysis and teaching. She was a New York City public school teacher and has worked in the UN, the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network. She currently works with survivors of homicide victims, and community violence. Along with Wazina, she co-wrote and performs Coming Out Muslim, Radical Acts of Love. Terna is a dervish in the, you mind reading that part for me?
Yep, Nur Ashki Jarahi, Sufi order.
Sufi order, and practices the healing art of Jin Shin Jitsu. She is committed to striving towards and facilitating active remembrance that there is a space for all of us in God's creation. Yes, indeed. That is a beautiful bio right there.
Thank you.
How do you come to having such an amazing bio? How does one do that?
Well, I think of it, I wanted to say by accident, but of course I don't actually believe in accidents. I certainly didn't set out to find myself on the path that I'm on, but the thing that has guided me to each part of my journey is really God, and my faith has been the most important thing to me from the time I can remember. And my priority in life is to be in alignment with the divine will, and that's led me to each and every place that I've been. So I started out wanting to be an international mediator. I've been a writer my whole life, so that was always there. But I really wanted to be a mediator, and so that was the track I was on. And in the course of preparing for that and working at the UN, I discovered that I don't really, for me and for my particular gifts, that felt like, I'd be basically applying Band-Aids, and I was really interested in how do we go to the root of the kinds of conflicts that we see in the world. And that led me to working with young people to really contribute to shaping a different way of understanding and being in conflict, the experience of difference, access to resources and how we think about that, and really striving to support young people in decolonizing their minds and decolonizing my own and the people around me, because fundamentally I think that's the thing that leads to the deep liberation and change that we strive for. So that's a little bit of how I started out. That got me to teaching, which got me to the nonprofit sector, which got me somehow to where I'm at now in terms of doing mental health work. But I'm really interested in expanding outside of the common frames and boxes that we've been taught are the way it is.
So many pathways I want to take from that whole explanation. Well, that last part, getting out of the boxes of what we're told is what is, how does one do that? How do you get out of a box?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing is to know you're in a box. And something I'm continually amazed by is how differently we can experience life depending on the context that we're in, depending on where we are born, where we grow up, the culture of our parents, the influence of media, and our own passions and drives. So for me, the first step is you got to understand you're in a box, and then you got to know what the box is. and you have to understand the trajectory that the box tells you you're supposed to take, right? What the walls that it says, okay, you've hit a wall, this is the wall, you're not supposed to go further than this. You have to have a clear understanding of what those edges are. And once you have that understanding, it's through, my belief is it's through education, it's through experience, it's through curiosity that one is able to begin to gather the tools to then get out of the box and see what else is out there, or actually what else is within.
So education, curiosity. What for you, maybe if we can ground it in a personal example, what was for you, either when you were growing up or becoming an adult, when was the time where you felt, okay, this is a box, I want to move out of this? What was a process that you went through for any boxes that you discovered?
Yeah, well, I think education, which means so many things, was definitely a box. Education is hugely important in my family. I'm my mother's first child. She's from Liberia, and my father's from Nigeria. And so my grandfather was, he started out as an illiterate man who then went on to build an engineering empire in Nigeria. And he really changed the whole fate of the lineage. And it was through the power of education, going to school, and kind of following the opportunities that opened up. So I was very much, I have to say, in terms of privilege, that's the place where I have a lot of privilege as someone who's been through secondary school, through higher education institutions and so forth. And I went to a boarding school for high school. It was an elite boarding school in New England. And I felt very much, it was the kind of place that legacy, Rockefellers, Vanderbilts, all these big names in American history sent their children.
Wow.
And the trajectory was go to this school, go to an Ivy League, make a lot of money or something,
be a doctor.
Be successful. And along about probably my junior or senior year, I just felt like I didn't have the language for it, but I knew I wanted to kind of buck the system. And so my rebellion was to go to a school that was not in that kind of wheelhouse at that time. And that was my way of breaking, still within a box, right? Because I didn't have the perspective yet. But I was able to at least avoid that exact trajectory. Yeah.
So what school did you go to then?
I went to University of Chicago.
Oh, Chicago. Okay. Still a great school.
Still a good school. Yep. Still a good school. Yeah. But it was just a way of doing something that for that context that I was in was not the thing that people were doing,
And what did you tap into to find that inner strength to say, I'm going to do my own thing?
It was that, that fire that tells you, I must go this way, whatever that way is. You don't necessarily know, you don't necessarily have the words to talk about what that way is. You don't know what you're going to find there, but you have that drive that just tells you, if I don't go this way, somehow my life depends on that, and so it's that primal push, I'll say.
Yeah. You were saying at the beginning that your faith is one of the biggest connectors of your life. Does your faith have anything to do with that internal drive?
Yeah, I mean, my belief is that our internal drive, the things that we just know, or the passions that we just have, that those are divine guidance showing up in a way that we can do something with. And so most definitely, I'm sure it was my faith that led me to having the certainty that I had as a 17-year-old, that I had to do what I could do to not be on the track that other people were on. And so, you know, for me, those messages that come from God or, you know, spirit, however people kind of hold that, the universe, those messages show up in such powerful and undeniable ways. And so when I feel that pull, I know I have to listen. And I know for me that listening is an act of faith. And often it requires a leap into the unknown. You know, you don't know what you're going to find, but you have to take the leap, and you have to trust and believe that it's going to get you where you need to be.
That's inspiring. What's faith's relationship with religion?
Oh, that's a powerful question. Well, you know, at this point in my life, as someone who converted, I was raised Christian, I was raised Episcopalian more specifically. And what I always knew for me was that it was my relationship with God that was most important. And even at a young age, I understood that the form, because for me, religion is a form. It gives you, it provides some structure around how your faith can manifest. I see it as a vehicle. I don't see it as the end all in and of itself. And so for me, I like rituals. I especially love prayer, and the prayer of Islam really spoke to me. That was one of the first things that moved me about Islam. But fundamentally, I believe that religion is the form. It's the outer form. It's a way for the inner, that inner faith to manifest. Yeah.
That's awesome. How old were you when you converted?
19.
19.
Yeah. So almost 20 years ago now.
How do you feel when people ask you your conversion story?
Oh, I feel fine. I feel fine. For me, you know, I'm very much on the right path for myself. And I'm always happy to share how I got to that, you know. Okay.
Can you share with us?
Yeah. So as I said, I was raised Christian, went to raised Episcopalian. The high school I went to was Episcopalian, even though it was open to anyone. I was confirmed when I was a teenager, again, because I really just love rituals. And I think there's something powerful about the rituals of religion. And so even though by that point I was clear that I didn't feel the passion for the form of Christianity, it's what was available to me at the time. And I also had a lot of Jewish friends, and so I got exposed to some of the theology of Judaism, and really, I still really vibe with that and have a deep love and respect for Judaism. And as a Black person, I felt that converting to Judaism, it just felt like somehow it wasn't going to quite allow me the peace that I wanted in terms of being able to be in community with people. And of course, you know, they're Black Jews, have been forever. The way that the world sees Jews, though, is not Jews of color, and it's not Black Jews. And so there's something about that felt like, I want something a little bit different. And Islam came to me through, I have a stepmother who's Muslim, and I went to Nigeria when I was in college for the first time in like 13 years, and it was Ramadan, and I saw people breaking fast, and it moved me. It really it moved me in a deep way. So when I got back to school in Chicago, I asked a friend of mine who was a convert to teach me. And so he would meet with me in the prayer room weekly for several months, and we would talk about Islam. We would talk about the theology, the T.H.E, the theology of oneness. We would talk about the 5 pillars. And I met with a Muslim woman who, you know, we would have similar conversations, and I got to see the deep the way I think about it is kind of like a plant. You know, we as human beings are plants and we need to be watered. And I saw the way that Islam watered these people.
Wow.
Wanted that. And so that's what led me to Islam ultimately.
And does Islam water you? Do you feel it giving you that nourishment?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. 100%. Yeah. And, you know, what I'll say is that often folks who are not Muslim, and even some folks who are, think of Islam as a monolith. As much as, you know, being a convert brings with it some challenges in terms of how people who are born Muslim see and understand what conversion means, I think it gives me the advantage of being able to just love Islam without any cultural association. You know, for me, it's not associated with, like, you know, childhood parties or celebrations or, you know, things like that. And so I get to just love Islam and feel loved by Allah in a way that is unencumbered. And so I mean, I tell you what, I feel Allah's love every single day of my life. I feel the nourishment every single day of my life. And I count on that and I need it. And so, yeah, it waters me. It waters me.
Woo! That's inspiring. So, you know, one thing that I think that I benefit from in the fact that I wasn't raised Muslim is that Islam was never used to as the boogeyman. You know what I mean? Like when you're growing up and your parents are like, don't do that because of God. Like they made God like a boogeyman.
Yeah.
Did you experience it all growing up? How was like being raised in religion used in your family? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I mean, this is a broad statement, but I feel fairly confident in saying that, you know, Africans, like, God is a fact. It's not an optional thing that, you know, it's just a fact. It's how it is. And so I was raised very much with that certainty. And it was I never had the experience of God being used, you know, as a boogeyman, as you say. It was just like, you go to church to show your gratitude, you know, you say your prayers to show your gratitude. You need help, you pray, you know, you ask from the ultimate source. It was just like a fact of life, not something that was used or manipulated by human beings, you know, to get other ones to do what they wanted. That was the experience that I had growing up with it. And I'm thankful to my mom for that. You know, I think when I got a little bit older, and especially once queerness kind of came into the picture, that was a time where I saw the way that people's sense of religion interfered with the ability to then like connect and make sense of me. Okay, got you. Yeah. So I think that's a good transition into talking about your brilliant and amazing play, Coming Out Muslim. Yeah. How would you describe Coming Out Muslim in your words? Yeah, I would describe it as a storytelling performance. All the stories that we tell are true to our experience. And I think it's a beautiful combination of, you know, there's definitely humor. There's a lot about family and our relationship to family, and how we kind of make sense of other people's like challenge in reconciling non-heterosexual, being non-heterosexual with an understanding of God. So it's about how we make sense of other people's issues with that, how we make sense of it for ourselves. And ultimately, you know, it's about that striving that all of us are doing, you know, constantly. We're all striving to feel a sense of peace. We're all striving to feel a sense of connection with ourselves, with something beyond ourselves. And so for me at this point, this is year 6 now. When I think about coming out Muslim, the underpinning is really the striving. You know, these are stories about us striving to connect and to have peace and to feel whole.
And you keep saying we. Who's we?
My beautiful co-creator was Zina, and also my friends. We were friends, and Coming Out Muslim came out of a collaboration we did called Interrupting Islamophobia back in 2011, which was a 6 or 7 week study group for youth workers, educators, and so forth, to give them some tools ahead of the 10th anniversary of 9/11, to be able to work with their colleagues and students and people around them. And so each week had a theme, and we had a week called Queering Islam, about the experiences of folks marginalized within Islam. And one of our participants, Laura Marie, who has been such an amazing ally and champion for us. She's a theater maker, and she said, why don't you should make something, and I will do everything. I'll produce it. I'll get the space. I'll, whatever you want, just write. And so she really encouraged us, and that's how we got started. We thought it was going to be 3 nights, maybe 50 people would come in total. It was sold out every night, and then we're still doing it 6 years later. So, and I believe that's because there's the hunger for the conversation.
Which conversation?
I think it's the conversation. Ultimately, for me, I see it as a conversation about wholeness. We're very much trained, I think, talking about boxes that govern our lives. One of the boxes I see that I think really is one of the fundamental ones that keeps us where we're at, is the sense that one has to be fragmented, that, in order to make it in life, you got to cut something off, you got to cut your queerness off, just cut that out, or you got to cut your faith off, cut that off, or you got to cut your culture off, you got to cut your style off if it's not conforming to, the space that you're in. We're taught that fragmentation is normal. And so the message we put forth is that fragmentation does not have to be the story, that it's actually possible to move from a place of wholeness, or at least with wholeness as the thing that we're moving toward, right? And so people are hungry for that, because that's not a conversation that you hear or get to have in a lot of places.
That's awesome. What about for those who already know that I can be whole, but I don't feel like I have a place where I can do that? For those people, what do you think their relationship is to coming out Muslim?
Yeah, well, I mean, so we also, the Coming Out Muslim Radical Acts of Love, and radical is a funny word in this time, especially in relation to anything to do with Islam. However, if we go back to the etymology of it, radical actually means returning to the root. And so if we say that the root is wholeness, it's about, for those who are operating from the space of wholeness is possible, I'm striving toward that already. It's about, okay, well, we already know you're not going to just go out on the street, most likely, and find places that encourage your wholeness. So how do you make those places? How do you make those spaces for yourself and for other people?
And Coming Out Muslim is one of those spaces.
Yeah, I think it is. I think that's something that we're able to offer for, an hour or two, is a place where people can relax into whatever wholeness it is that they're living in.
And if my opinion counts for anything, I co-sign that. It totally feels like I'm home. It's great. I've gotten to be a part of 3 nights of the event, the play. And it's more than just a play. It's coming there. It's coming and sitting. Oh, hey, you're here. Oh my gosh. Seeing it, talking afterwards. Y'all always come off stage and we're like, I got to talk to you. Oh my gosh. You know what I mean? So it's the whole night. It's just electric. So I just want to affirm and appreciate that aspect of it. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's been a really beautiful element of it is that community vibe. You know, sometimes we're in a spot where a fair number of people may already know each other, but often we're in places where they don't. And so the feeling, the cohesion that happens by the end of the show is really powerful and amazing. And we've been privileged to hear some beautiful stories of friendships and other kinds of relationships that come out of people having met at the show.
You were saying queerness and Islam. Would that be the way you would describe your identity?
I mean, fundamentally, I just see myself as a Muslim, you know, period. Like, I don't need any extra stuff around that. However, in this time, I am intentional about saying queer because I have an opportunity to stand, you know, and use my face and my name to be visible in a way that a lot of folks who are holding those identities are not able to be. And so for that reason, I put it forth, you know, to show that it's possible for those who don't get to see images of themselves or people like them reflected back. You know, I'm standing here and I say I'm a queer Muslim as a way to just be like, yep, you're not alone. We out here.
That's awesome. And just to ask on behalf of, you know, I work with young people or also adults who are now trying to learn how to use inclusive language. And so they're trying to navigate through, what does LGBTQ all mean? And so they might be thinking, okay, do I say that you're gay, you're lesbian? I thought queer was a bad word. What can you kind of walk through how you came to use the term then queer out of all the options or ways you could describe it for those folks?
Yeah, and you know, I have to say, I'm in my mid-30s now, and I'm like amazed by the young people, and there's like words and descriptors that, you know, I would have totally blown. I mean, they blow my mind now, but they would have blown my mind when I was like 17, 16, could barely, you know, figure anything out. So mad props to the young folks who are blazing trails.
Indeed.
So for me, you know, I use queer as an umbrella term, and a lot of people, I think, in my generation do. It's true that queer was a bad word and is a bad word or a negative word for a lot of folks. And I find that those folks tend to be in a different generation for me. Mm-hmm. And so I came up in a time where we were using queer kind of as like a, you know, an FU to the system, the powers that be. Like, we really, really, really not trying to fit into no you know, and so it was a reclamation of the word. I didn't know it as a negative word. I only ever knew it as a way of basically holding space for all of those identities that didn't fit into, you know, the hetero gender binary boxes. You know, so for me, queer is a term that kind of encompasses all of those identities that, you know, don't fit into the traditional, whatever that actually means, you know. Yeah, so I use it for that reason. And some folks use it as simply as a way of saying I'm not heterosexual. Some people use it as a political term. So it's not just about sexual orientation or gender identity. It's also about like queering ideas about the way that things are and can be. So we talk about queering politics, we talk about queering family and all of that stuff. That just means, you know, what are the other ways of doing or moving in these realms that are different from what we've been told is the normal way. So that's awesome. How I think about it.
That's wonderful. And I know each person will have their own answer, but for those who are wondering then, if someone were to say gay or lesbian rather than queer, would that feel like limiting or not quite the word that you would appreciate? What response would you give for them?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, even sometimes I myself, ask that question if I know I'm engaging with someone for whom queer is like really incomprehensible. So for me, I identify as bisexual. And I think that's important to say because that's a identity that often, even within LGBTQ circles, is people have a lot of feelings about it. And so again, in the spirit of visibility, I say that I often say I'm like a mostly gay bisexual.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But, I don't get offended. If you calling me something that's not right, I'll just guide you to the right place.
That's awesome. And what is people's disagreement with the word bisexual as opposed to queer?
I don't know if it's disagreement, but it's like this idea that if you're bisexual, actually what that really means is that you're sitting on a fence, oftentimes, and depending on gender, also that can get construed as being a very sexualized identity, which I think a lesbian identity, gay identity, those are already very sexualized in the minds of like many folks already. And bisexual, I think, gets sexualized in a way that's that doesn't feel good. It feels like, it's all about the bodies and something that's kind of like, dirty and all of that stuff. And it's not about relationships. And so, even within the community, just that sense of like, well, pick a side already, actually, you'll be gay in a minute, you're just like, this is the halfway house to gay. There's a lot of that kind of thing.
Okay. I've heard people say too, bisexual makes it sound like it's binary as opposed to queer. Yeah. It's more open.
Yeah, that's true. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for breaking that down for us. Much appreciated.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm sure that when you tell people you're Muslim and queer, or just Muslim, that people are shocked or have questions like, well, isn't Islam inherently heterosexist, homophobic, sexist? Like, why would you convert to this? They're not incongruent. What are your thoughts or responses when those kind of accusations and conversations come up?
Yeah, a lot of people believe that, and a lot of people have those questions, concerns, judgments, repulsions, and for me, the foundation that I stand on before we get into the nitty gritty details of the story of Lot and all that stuff, is that I know it's a fact of my life that a lot is my road dog. You know what I mean? Like,
there we go.
The fact of my life. And one of the things I say in the show is that every prayer I've ever prayed has been answered. And this is how I know that the Most High has not forsaken me. And I stand on that. I pray and I feel very loved. I feel very protected. I feel very cared for. And so nobody's going to come and tell me that I should be feeling differently for any reason. That's the truth that I know. And so that's the foundation that I start any conversation about the incongruity. I start from that place, right? And fundamentally, I think when people have those thoughts or those concerns or have been trained, it's a training that people get through their mosques or through the media or like whatever. When people have been trained into that belief, it comes from, for me, it's a place that's not the heart. It doesn't come from the heart, right? So if we were to sit together and really, really take a moment to tune in to the heart space, to the place where we actually feel God, right? Because God that's where we feel it. It's not in our brain, right? If we take a minute to tune in there, I want to challenge people to ask, if you say, okay, gays are wrong, this, queers are wrong, whatever. When you tune into your heart space, what do you actually find there when you ask that question? And I'm willing to guess that is probably not the thing that you would say from your mind space, right? It's not the thing that you would say with, come with all your papers and your proofs and your this and your that. And at the end of the day, if we want to talk about interpretation, we can talk about that all day long. We already know that there are so many different, or there are different ways to understand the stories that lead people to the belief that homosexuality is a sin, or I should just say non-heterosexuality is incongruent with faith. And there are lots of scholars, theologians who have done beautiful work around different ways of understanding the story of Lot, Sodom and Gomorrah, and all of those things.
Who are some of, so I feel you that when people first enter it, that there's no relationship to the person or people that they're speaking about, that it's just like a box, and that what people feel is that resistance to that box. And it's tied to God. So it's like a big box for a lot of people.
Yep.
And that when they say homophobic things, heterosexist things, it's never based upon a relationship. So I agree with you that once I form that relationship. So then what about the part that where there is an intellectual aspect of interpretations and scholars? Do you mind sharing any of that with us as well?
Sure. So Scott Kugel has a book called Homosexuality in Islam, which is, he's a very well-regarded scholar of
What was his name again?
Scott Kugel.
Scott Kugel, okay.
Yep. And that's a great starting point for folks, because what he does is he goes through and provides a pretty thorough exploration of the different ways that people have understood homosexuality in Islam over time, which actually was quite different than what it is now in this time that we're in. We actually have regressed, in my opinion, and that's one of the things the book talks about. We've regressed in terms of attitudes towards homosexuality in this time. So he provides a beautiful exploration of some of those things. Muhsin Hendricks out of South Africa has done amazing work around the story of the prophet Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah, and understanding the story as being one fundamentally about hospitality. And every Muslim knows hospitality is like one of the bedrocks of one's expression of faith. And so he gets into details about how that story was really about inhospitality, and lots of people, Christian scholars, Jewish scholars, and Muslim scholars have also looked at that as a story about rape rather than a story about homosexuality. So there's lots of stuff there, for folks to unpack.
Does it sometimes become tiresome that you always have to go into this conversation?
Yes, it does. I could feel it actually just now. I was like, energy drain.
Yeah, because it starts to come down to like, okay, literally you got to read the book. Like, Terna can't be the like regurgitate. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And, I always say that no one person can hold the entirety of, an understanding of a particular topic. So I'm speaking from my own subjectivity in the situation, so there's that. But yeah, there's plenty to read if folks are interested in reading. People have done and are doing amazing scholarship, even looking at how in the Quran that there actually is mention of queer folks. And so yeah, there's like amazing stuff going on there. Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you sharing with us. It does mean a lot. I know that you're also really into body work and helping people recover from trauma.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so, the body, there's a book that came out recently called The Body Keeps the Score. And I think that's a beautiful, it's by Bessel van der Kolk, who is a pioneer in the field of mental health and psychology around the way that trauma affects the body and the brain. And so basically, our body takes in all of our experiences and remembers them in ways that our brain and our conscious mind cannot. And so when we have experiences that basically reshape the way that we move in the world, literally, of course, the body remembers that and it holds on to that. And I also believe that because, related to trauma, but also just as a fact, the body is the vehicle for liberation. This is what we live in.
Wow.
Wow.
That sentence right there.
Yeah, this is it. We're not gonna get to liberation outside of our bodies. And so how do we relate to our bodies, notice them? Because I think in American society, certainly, we're often trained away from noticing our bodies internally, right? Not as sexual objects, not as objects of desire and that kind of thing, but internally noticing all of the shades and the moods and all the things that your body experiences in the course of a day. And so it's about, for me, the way that I think about bodies, it's how do we notice what our bodies are telling us, just to notice it. And then how do we kind of make sense and use the wisdom that's coming through to serve our higher purpose? How do we do that? And so, I have my particular modality, Jin Shinjitsu, which is similar to acupuncture, but without needles. And there are lots of modalities that folks can access to kind of help them make sense of the language of the body, right? We know how to talk, we have words, but how do we then become experts in the language of the body and of our own bodies as well?
What would you say is a pathway to that then? Where I'm okay, I'm in, I buy into this, now what?
Yeah, well, so, there's a few different places that one can start, but, noticing. So one simple thing that I invite people to do is to kind of take a moment, a minute, and just to go quiet and just to notice. So it's a body scan. If folks aren't quite ready for a body scan, it's literally just close your eyes or look at the floor. Breathe, intentionally breathe, notice your breath. Is it shallow? Is it deep? Are you able to get all of the air in there? Is your spine slumped? Is it straight? Are your shoulders up here? There's so many different things that you can just begin to observe. And in observing them, you're getting information, right? So if my shoulders are up here and I didn't even know it, how might I understand this, Tom? If you see me and I'm like this, how might you understand where I might be in my day?
Anxious.
Exactly. I might be anxious, stressed out, concerned, and so in my noticing, it gives me an opportunity just to go ahead and drop those. And in dropping them, already I'm shifting something.
Ooh, even chemically, right? Because the shoulders up release different hormones than down.
Absolutely. Already shifting something. And something that I also offer from Jin Shinjitsu that's really, really easy for folks to do is to hold your fingers. You don't have to grip them hard or anything like that, but just by wrapping your opposite hand around each of your fingers, it begins to work with the energetics of the body. So you're already beginning to soothe all of your organ systems. You're beginning to soothe your emotional body as well. Something as simple as holding your fingers. And that's ancient wisdom that we inherently have as well.
That's two crazy things that came out of that for me is my dad told me my whole life, like I've always gone like this. And I noticed that during meetings or things like that, I'm doing that. And I see little, like really little kids when too much excitement comes up or something, they're always like, you know what I'm saying? Is that why?
So it's definitely related. So for example, one common thing that little kids do, right, is they suck their thumb or, you know, they're doing something with their thumb. And there's a reason for that. This thumb energy is actually connected to the feeling of anxiety.
Wow.
And so your thumb is directly connected energetically to your stomach and your spleen energy. Now, you know, when you get anxious or worried or nervous or whatever, your stomach starts to do stuff, right? And so kids know instinctively, if I just do this, I'm going to feel better.
Wow.
Right? So they already know. We come with this wisdom. People put their hands behind their head. There's actually some energetic points at the back of the skull here, the base of the skull. When you put your hands on them, you're sending a message to your whole energetic system that allows you to relax, right? And so on and on and on, holding your middle finger. I remember one time I was so angry, probably like one of the top 5 angriest I've been in my life. And I was like, got on a bus and I was like yelling in the phone. And I looked around, I was like, oh no, I can't be doing this. So I held my middle finger, which is connected to the emotion of anger. Wow. And within 2 to 3 minutes, all the heat in my body just totally left my body and I was calm again, you know? So our fingers are powerful, just our fingers, we're not even talking about the rest of the amazing energetics that are possible, but we have this wisdom, you know?
Yeah. I feel robbed right now. Why was I not taught this? Like, why wasn't first grade when they talked about our fingers? Like,
wouldn't that be amazing? Wouldn't that be amazing? Yeah, but you know now, so more power. Like now you have the information and you've already been doing things too. So that's, you know, this is the energetics of being is just so incredible. It's really something.
And for those folks who are feeling the burn right now of passion like I am, Terna has agreed for your free giveaway this episode she's going to give us a handout on a little body scanning. Well, I don't want to say little. On a transformative body scanning exercise you can do. So if you want to download that and go through it yourself, it's at tomearl.com/Terna. And Terna is spelled Terna. Terna. tomearl.com/Terna. And you can download that, enjoy it, and be sure to shout out to her though and let her know how you appreciated it.
Absolutely. Get at it. And one thing I do want to say is about, I don't want to lose the part of your question that was about trauma.
Yeah.
And the body. So, you know, what we know is that trauma affects our the functioning of our brain. It changes your brain. Okay. And so, you know, one way of understanding trauma is that something happens, it overwhelms your capacity to kind of like deal with it in the moment. You feel unsafe. It calls up a deep feeling of unsafety. And one of the things that can happen is we get stuck in the fight or flight response, right? We get stuck in that state of like always being on our guard, and that has consequences chemically in our body that can affect all of our systems. It has consequences on our ability to sleep, for example, which we know is like one of the fundamental building blocks. And so in terms of recovering from trauma, there's the way that, you know, talk therapies, cognitive behavioral therapies there's the work that they can do. And my belief is that you also have to deal directly with helping people regain a sense of safety in their own bodies. That's a fundamental part of the healing that is, for me, absolutely essential to healing from trauma, is feeling a sense of safety and control in your own body again.
At the nonprofit, I'm the director of Free Arts. We work with young people who have experienced abuse, neglect, trauma, and especially sexual violence. That sounds like, how is that not already incorporated into every therapy of somebody who's experienced some form of sexual violence, sexual abuse? Because that's the big part, is feeling like your body's betrayed you, you know, that you don't feel home in your body anymore. Whew, I have a feeling a lot of people right now, including me, are like, where has this been?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, I mean, again, it's about knowing, having that education and the information to know where to even look, you know, get some understanding that resonates, right? Because the mental health field, the way that, you know, it comes through in mainstream media is very limited in terms of, you know, it's the way that it presents and talks about trauma and mental health, period, you know, and mental illness as well. And so these are not things that are new, right? People have been experiencing trauma forever, right? People have been experiencing mental health issues forever in different ways, right? And so there's the wisdom that is already accumulated from thousands of years in so many cultures in the world. And how do we like really activate and access that wisdom for ourselves and understand that there are different ways of getting to healing? You know, talk therapy may not work for some people, right? And so, you know, how do you find the thing that's going to vibe and resonate with you?
There was a experience I had in 2015 where for about 6 months, every day, I was working with a group of people. It was a different group each week. And then it would always culminate in us hearing about an 1.5 hour long story of a Holocaust survivor. And then the next day, a survivor of human trafficking. So I'd hear these stories, and then I'd process with people how systemic discrimination creates these situations. And every time people would like resist, like, no, it's not that bad. And after hearing these stories and putting up with people's resistance, I got up one day and I could not move. My entire back was like locked. You know what I mean? So that was one of my epiphanies that, oh, I must be storing some of this secondhand trauma within my body.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And oftentimes a lot of the health issues, or, you know, what people understand is, oh, I'm dealing with diabetes. Oh, I got cancer. Oh, I broke my leg. Oh, you know, all these different things. Even I got a cold. Those are not isolated ailments, you know, experiences. They're directly related to things that are going on at other levels of your being and how you're holding those. And so whenever people tell me, oh man, I've been dealing with such and such an injury for such a long time, I'm always curious about, so this is something for the viewers. A question to ask yourself when you have an ailment or an injury is, when did it happen, and what was going on in your life when it happened or around the time that it happened? And just begin to see if, you know, there's a relationship that you can already identify between what was going on in your life and the thing that showed up for you. Somebody who has chronic stomach issues, for example, I already know that they're dealing with some chronic anxiety or like worry type related stuff, right? So, you know, there's different ways of understanding what specific parts of the body relate to, but those relationships are there.
That's awesome. The big question we like to ask always is, what else could this mean? Right? So you get a cold. What else could this mean besides germs?
Yes.
Like that. What do you think are the consequences? And I'm always trying to frame this question in a non-ableist way. But what are the consequences then of our society becoming more and more sedentary?
Not good. I mean, I'm experiencing that myself. You know, I've gone from living in New York City, which is a city where by some kind of way you got to get around, you know, and to a life where I'm in my car a lot for my job and this and that. And I feel the difference. You know, again, our bodies were meant to move in some kind of way. However, whatever way is available to us, they were meant to have some sort of motion. And so if you're in a situation where you're not really getting that, or your emotion is limited beyond what is possible for your particular body, there's going to be consequences for that. And I don't mean even, just like people might think, oh, I'm more susceptible to disease or whatever. Not just that, but emotionally, I think it has spiritual consequences as well. One of the things I know about myself is that when I'm in motion, it does something for my spirit. It allows a kind of like flexibility of spirit, and so sometimes when I'm feeling like a little tight on the inside, movement helps me to loosen that up on the the outer movement. Yep. Helps with the inner movement.
That's why they say for people, if you're feeling chronic depression, one of the best things you can do is start to work out, to start to run, to bring that, and it releases those different chemicals that are positive. I always recommend to people every 50 minutes at a minimum, set an alarm on your phone and make sure you stand up and just like move, breathe in. We're really not getting enough oxygen into our body. Yeah. Especially they found this thing called screen apnea. And they found by studying the different ways people breathe, when they look at screens, that our breathing becomes shallow, similar to sleep apnea, when we look at screens.
Interesting.
So if you imagine every time you have a break, even something like waiting for an elevator, you look at your phone, your breathing becomes shallow, which means less oxygen into your body, which means less blood flow. So next time, try when you're in an elevator, just breathing in, get some oxygen up in there.
Yeah. And more stress, because one of the things that we know about breathing is that particularly the breathing that's from the diaphragm, from where you can see your stomach expand, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which
what?
The parasympathetic nervous system. So,
okay.
The sympathetic nervous system is what goes into action when fight or flight happens. And it basically activates our limbic and reptilian brain. So that survival mode state, and it takes our prefrontal cortex, which is where we're the thing that allows us human beings to be able to think and reason and all of those things. Yoink, it's gone offline.
Wow.
So when you breathe, do diaphragmatic breathing, so where you breathe in and out and your stomach is expanding and going in, that breathing tickles something called the vagus nerve.
What?
It's from the base of your brainstem all the way down your spine. It allows that nerve to be activated, and it is then able to send a message to your prefrontal cortex, okay, back online, and you're able to think again.
From breathing?
Yeah, from breathing.
If that doesn't make me believe in God, like, hey, let me give you something that you have to do that'll make you feel happy when you do, and it's in abundance. Breathing. That's so inspiring.
Absolutely. So, just one way to just check kind of where your breathing is at, you put one hand on your chest, one on your stomach, and your goal is just to inhale and exhale. You want the hand on your stomach to move, right? If only your chest is moving, you're not hitting that diaphragm. And an easy way to do it is you're going to inhale for 3, hold it, and exhale for a count of 6. That'll bring you back online. That'll like kind of soothe your system. If you're looking to get some energy, you do the opposite. So you breathe in for 6 and you exhale for 3.
Do you have time for me to ask you 2 more questions?
Sure.
My first question is, with all of this knowledge of how the body works, and you were talking about the forehead, how do you think that relates to the physical movements of salat? Which, for those who aren't aware, salat is the group prayer or the individual prayer. It's the ritual of how we pray in Islam. If you've seen people with their foreheads to the ground, we call that salat. Because I always think, like, I notice how we start like this, and I've done Tai Chi. That's the first movement of Tai Chi. You know what I mean? So like, I know that those movements aren't on accident. What are your thoughts?
Right. And I mean, so I also read something from a Muslim yogi about how each of the positions of salat correspond to yoga poses as well. So it's beyond my understanding of, the spiritual energetics, but the fact that, right, just in this immediate conversation, we can think of 3 cultures where, actually I can think of 4, right? Because like in Hinduism, I believe that prostration, right? That prostration is really important. Buddhism, prostration is critical, right? It's one of the fundamental things that you do in your practice, right? So we can already think of a number of traditions that moves across. So I don't know the magic, the divine mystery that's in it, but clearly there's something. What I know is when I'm in that position of prostration with my head on my prayer carpet, it feels like a release for me. I feel like it's a physical release for me. And so there's some chemical, something that's going on there.